Hello, Dave here. This mini morsel, learn JavaScript with me, functions 2, and we're taking a look at returning a value from a user-defined function. And this is the next logical step from functions 1, where we introduced the basic syntax, arguments, and created a simple example. We are working through chapter 7 of the book, Modern JavaScript, Develop and Design by Larry Ullman. And you can find out more information about this book at larryullman.com. And I've chosen this book to learn JavaScript with, going through it step by step, going through these exercises and these videos to solidify my knowledge. And now that we're in chapter 7, let me get the book out of the way here. We've already gone through, or I've gone through chapters 4, 5, 6, and now into chapter 7. And in chapter 7, there's 5 exercises. The other ones only had 4. But this function's in a loop, or it was looping through and showing these numbers, and now doing all these same activities with a function. So as he slowly introduced topics through the previous 3 chapters, now we're starting to put things together and putting it into functions. So it really seems like we kind of got through the real basics up through chapter 6. And I feel like now with functions, we're starting to get into some real programming, or let me say we're just scratching the surface of more intermediate type activities. So let's jump right in and learn a little more about functions and returning a value from a function. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take a look through the Firebug console at returning a value, and then actually look at the code behind this example here, this chapter 7, 6 random numbers, now with functions. And if you look back, I have it back here. Here's what it was in chapter 5. Notice that it looks basically the same. We basically use a function to develop 6 random numbers. If we hit refresh, it refreshes those numbers. If I come back here, same thing. If I hit refresh, it refreshes those numbers. The only difference between these two, between the HTML of the two, is my text, chapter 7 versus chapter 5, and then now with functions, and adding a little bit up here. But the actual display code, nothing has changed, so no real HTML changes here, nothing to discuss. And once again, you can find information at davecoast.com. I have a global post out here right now. I'm up through chapter 6 because I'm just starting these chapter 7 series. The chapter 7 videos will be included in here, and I'll update this entire thing once I finish the other 3 sections on functions. And I have a subdomain, js.davecoast.com, which is available. I'm calling this our sandbox. We do whatever we want. You can come out here, go through any of these exercises, and debug away and see the code behind the scenes. And for the sake of these videos, I'm doing it on my local XAMPP server. XAMPP being a wonderful tool to help learn this, and also Firefox with the Firebug add-in is critical. So let's go ahead and turn on Firebug by clicking the cute little bug up here. I'm going to go ahead and detach it from the bottom of the screen here, and it gives us a little work area here. If you want to get to this exact place, a lot of times it'll come up in HTML mode or CSS mode, depending on what you looked at with it last. But I basically started Firebug, went to console, clicked on this little doodad down here, which shows a command editor, and that just gives us the ability to put commands over here, and it doesn't execute them until you click run. And the only difference there is entering the same command here, you don't have multiple lines to make it a little clearer. So let me go back into this mode, a nice fun mode, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at an example of a function. So in our previous functions one, we basically showed that you can simply create a function by typing function. And let me just scrunch this a little bit here. I guess that wasn't necessary. Anyway, I can create a function, and I'll call this test function 1 and give it the parentheses, which is used for the argument. And it didn't like that. I'm going to put a space in there. I don't know why. Oh, okay. No problem. Let's go ahead. Function, space, squigglies, right? And we have those squigglies there. And now we can go ahead and put in some function stuff here. Let me go ahead and just give it a little argument just so you see what it looks like. And I'm going to call this arg1. And then I can say, and I'm just going to indent that a little bit. And I'm going to say console.log. And just some text in here. This is arg that was passed, space, close that quote, and concatenate that with arg1. And basically console.log, handy dandy little tool, just so it prints it out. I can say run that. Ooh, and it didn't like that because I was missing I always do this, missing my last parenthesis. But we have a syntax checker there. So you got to close your parentheses for your console.log. And it's still saying undefined because you also have to close it with a semicolon. So let's run that. And now undefined, and it is created. Ooh, and I think it was created anyway, and it's probably optional to put that semicolon for the last one. Either way, let's go ahead and get rid of this, and I can do test function 1 and pass it. ABC is a string, and now execute that. And where's my, oh, there we go. See, it was only showing me the errors. I had to switch that to show all log entries, and executing that console.log statement, see how it concatenates this text with whatever argument I passed it, and this argument that was passed is ABC is a string, right? And I can set it another simple value of a number 12557.83. Let's run that. And I get the argument that was passed is 12557.83, right? And we can do true for a Boolean. Anyway, all fun in the sun. We can put in an array, string 1, string 2, 1, 2, 3, comma, true. There's an array. Let's go ahead and put in our closing bracket. Let's run it. And we see the arg that was passed. Here's the array. All well and good. So now that was the old nice and easy create a function. And we see that the function here, right? That's that. Here's the function definition. Very simple. Now let's go ahead, and I'm just going to copy this. I kind of created it beforehand, but working it out in the console here is the best way to learn it. And I'm going to go ahead and put that in there. Notice how it puts my strings, right? See quoted strings, it makes them red. It does the code highlighting. It's a beautiful thing. Let me just clear the console. And here's a function. I'm calling it display return val, and I'm sending it one argument, input argument, and doing a switch statement in here. So a switch statement is our one main statement in the function. And if under the case, when the type of the argument is a string, I'm going to say it's a string and show the argument. And when it's a number, I'm going to say it's a number, show the argument. If it's a Boolean, say it's a Boolean plus the argument. And default or otherwise, return it's not a string number or Boolean, and here's the argument. So let's go ahead and run that to create it. And it created that function. So now I have my function available. And I can run this function. Let's go ahead and start it with a test string 1. And run that. And input argument is a string, test string 1. Yay. And let's try a number, which isn't in quotes, 256. A nice little power of 2 there. And input argument is a number, 256. So you see how this is returning a value, and that's our whole purpose here. And might as well try a true for a Boolean. And let's run that. Look at that. Input argument is a Boolean, and it's true. And one more time, just for fun, let's go ahead and do an array. Quote string 1. Where's the quote? Another string, a number, 22, true, and last string, and close our array brackets. I'll run that, and you see input argument, not a string, number, or Boolean, string 1, another string, 22, true, last string. So there's the array. There's returning values. Now, let me go ahead and return this back to standard console mode. And again, if you, I'm going to reattach it to the bottom of the screen here and turn off Firebug. And now we can go through and take a look at the code behind the actual book example. And one way to review these samples, and again, right, I'm in the chapter 5 version, right? I can turn on Firebug again, detach it, go into script mode, reload the script. It brings up the HTML, and I can go to my JavaScript code. And we're going to look at this in the editor just because it's a little easier. But it does. Here's the code from the number 5 one there. And again, could put in a breakpoint and execute the code line by line. Don't think we need to do that after what we just saw with the script. If you'd like to, if you'd like me to walk through that with you, just let me know. Dave@davecoast.com, or leave a comment at the bottom of the video. But let me reattach this to the bottom. Turn off Firebug, and let's go back here. Here's the number 7 one, and we can look at the same thing there. But rather, let's go ahead and take a look. Here is looking at the actual code, the JavaScript code in Notepad++ text editor. So let me go ahead and we'll take a look at the chapter 5. Once again, I have the HTML out here. The HTML will be available for download. Just made it fun. If I look at the code out here, right, you'll see that, you know, it's pretty straightforward. The only thing that really matters is this piece of the HTML here where we're putting stuff in. Everything else is fluffy, pretty stuff. I'm just playing around with the HTML and the styling of it. So let me get back to the code at hand here. And let's go ahead and take a quick look at, here's our chapter 5 code, right? And we see that there's, look, going from line 16 to line 29. That's all of the code that it was. Now it's going to be a little bit more code when we look at it with the functions, but these functions are going to be used all over the place. And the whole idea is creating functions to be used more than once or to be executed more than once. If you're only going to execute it once, it doesn't make sense to create a function. But once you execute something more than once, then it makes plenty of sense. So if we look at this code, right, it's basically every time it loads the window, it executes this function here called loop and insert. It comes down here, creates a variable, does a loop, right? The whole idea was showing this loop code. That was the purpose of this chapter 5 exercise, right? And we create a variable for the index, create a and do that 6 times because we're putting 6 numbers out there and incrementing it by 1 each time we run through it. And every time we run through it, we add the next number using this math.random method to get another random number. And then we do this document.getElementById. So that's going to be replaced with a function. This is going to be replaced with a function, or this whole thing here. And this part here is going to be replaced by a function. So let's go ahead and jump into number 7 here and take a look at our functions that perform those values. Once again, just comments up above. And if we look at the actual code here, we create this function, and it's just got a $sign. And according to Mr. Ullman there, our author, that's a common use in JavaScript. So just going along with it, reading ahead, it looks like it's used for various other things. But right now, we're creating a function. The function's name is $. It's passed one argument, and that's the ID. And if that element, right, that's an element, so if that type of ID is not undefined, that means that ID exists, then we return the document.getElementById reference to that ID value. So we're setting up that, and previously in every exercise so far, we've been doing not the return statement, this document.getElementById all over the place. That's how we get information from and put information to elements in the HTML page. And here's our return statement. So we call this function, we pass it an ID, and it returns to us the reference to the HTML element. Okay, so there's function number 1. Here's function number 2, set text. We created that in the previous video, functions 1. And what this does, right, is actually puts based on what element. So here's our element, and notice, right, so we're doing something with getting the element ID. So we pass it 2 arguments, 1 an element, and 2 some message text. So this message text is going into that element. And so if it's a string and the message, so if both of these are strings, both arguments are strings, then our element out variable is equal to the reference to that element ID, right? So here's where it's calling this function up here. So all of this code previously, right, was done here, right? Here's the document.getElementById. So now we're doing it with functions. So that's what, whoops, let me go back here. Here's our new code, and we're right here. So, and this is, so now we're actually programming, right? So we're using this function, and then, right, if the element text content is undefined, and again, here's all of this text here, now we're just wrapping it or encapsulating it in a function so that our actual code, right? So now here's our third one. So 3 functions. This is get random number max, right? Variable n equal max, the random method of the math object, right? And it multiplies it by the max and giving us that a number less than that total. And that's basically doing the same as this here, right? You see the by 100 and the parse init, but it's basically giving us a 2-digit number, random number. And we're not worrying about decimal points. And I would just look more into the math.random method, or the math object and the random method, for a little more detail on that. But once again, here's another function. So our actual loop and insert now is, right, we create a variable and we do this 6 times, right? Here's our for loop. And we do loopy numbers and we add or concatenate to that variable get random number with a max of 100, and it's putting that in there, then, right, and it's and a space, concatenating a space after the number, then we hit set text, right, numbers ID, and if I go to our HTML, you'll see here in the form, where's our form here? Oh, should have had this up. Where's my form? Or where's my, here it is, numbers ID, right? So it's within this span, insert here, back there, here's the code, and so there's our element, right, that we need to pass up here to get a reference to it. And loopy numbers, well, loopy numbers is this variable here that I've looped through 6 times, putting another number in there, so I should have 6 numbers in that loop. So there's our code, there's our JavaScript, and we took this relatively simple code here, and now we're doing it with 3 functions, and we'll continue to use these functions. We've already used, we'll use these more and more, and anytime we need the math.random, we'll also use that one. And here is using a return within a function, and it returns this value to wherever this function is called, and it can be called from anywhere. So once again, taking a look at our code here, so here's our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 numbers, and if I hit refresh here, it runs through that loop and does 6 new up to 2-digit random numbers, right? And here's our insert and back there, and here's our numbers ID for this element, right? If I go to Firefox here, let's just go ahead and inspect this element, right? And if we look at this element, look, ID, numbers ID. And it does actually show its values there, but the key here is the numbers ID, and that's how we're linking the JavaScript code to the HTML. So that is chapter 7, 6 random numbers, now with functions. And we did the same result as we did in chapter 5, but now a little bit real programming, and we used 3 functions to accomplish that information. This is Dave at davecoast.com. Email dave@davecoast.com. Leave a message at the bottom of the video. Any kind of feedback would be helpful. Is this useful? Are we learning something? I hope so. I believe I'm learning some JavaScript and hope you're learning it along with me. Thank you very much for watching.